The day the numbers refused to behave. March 18, 1943. 22,000 feet over the Ruhr Valley, Germany. The sky is clear in a way that feels dishonest. Pale blue, thin clouds like torn gauze, sunlight glinting off aluminum skins. Inside B-17G number 4229661, the air is thin and smells of heated oil, cordite residue, and will soaked with sweat. The bomber vibrates as 4 Wright Cyclone engines pull it forward in tight formation. Below, the river bends like a scar through factory smoke. First Lieutenant Harold Mason grips the control yoke with hands gone numb inside fleece-lined gloves. He is 24 years old, pilot in the left seat, eyes flicking between the lead ship and the black specks rising from the ground. Flak is already coming up. Not random yet. Too organized. Someone down there has them measured. Behind him, in the narrow flight deck, co-pilot Lieutenant Sam Rivers leans forward, peering through the windscreen. The first burst detonates off the left wing, close enough to slap the fuselage with pressure. The sound is not an explosion so much as a hammer blow from the inside. The aircraft shudders. Mason does not flinch. Training keeps his hand steady. He holds formation because falling out of it is a death sentence. The bombers around them look close enough to touch. Silver wings, black crosses painted on tails far below them on the ground. Then the second burst comes up low and behind. This one is different. It hits under the cockpit. There is a sharp metallic crack, followed by a wet sound that does not belong in an airplane. Rivers gasps. He slumps forward, his shoulder colliding with Mason. Blood sprays across the instrument panel in a fine mist. The shell fragment has punched through the nose section, slipped past the plexiglass angle, and torn into the co-pilot's chest. The armor plate behind their seats does nothing. It was never meant to. Engineers put it there to stop bullets from behind. Not from below. Not from that angle. Mason shoves Rivers back with his elbow, shouting for the navigator. The bomber keeps flying because it has to. There is no room for grief at 22,000 feet. By the time they limp back across the channel hours later, Rivers is dead. One more mark on a chalkboard somewhere in England. One more crew short a man who should have made it home. That night, in a drafty Nissan hut at Bassingbourn, the survivors sit on bunks and drink coffee that tastes like burnt rubber. No one talks much. They do not need to. Everyone has seen this before. Flak kills pilots. Flak kills co-pilots. Not always, but often enough that everyone notices. 200 miles away, in a quieter room with maps pinned to the walls, a captain with ink-stained fingers sharpens a pencil and updates the lost ledger. Crew casualties from flak. Pilot and co-pilot fatalities. Angle of impact unknown. The numbers are bad. Worse than last month. Worse than training projections. And yet, according to the manuals, everything is correct. The B-17 has armor. Steel plates behind the pilots. Reinforced seats. Bullet-resistant glass. Weight carefully calculated. Balance within tolerance. Every inch approved. On paper, this airplane should be surviving better than it is. The men who designed it insist the armor is in the right place. They had arguments about it years ago. They ran stress calculations. They worried about center of gravity, climb rate, fuel consumption. Every pound added forward costs speed and altitude. Move armor forward and you risk losing the bomber entirely. So the armor stays where it is. Behind the pilots. Protecting them from fighters coming in from the rear, guns blazing. But flak does not care about doctrine. The Germans fire it from below, timed and fused, exploding shells that send fragments upward like a steel hailstorm. Those fragments come through the nose, through the floor, through places the designers never expected to be vulnerable. The crews know this. They talk about it in whispers. About how the armor feels like it is guarding the wrong ghost. About how sitting higher or lower in the seat sometimes seems to matter more than the plate bolted behind them. No one officially listens. Until the morning after Mason lands without his co-pilot. At an engineering office near Wright Field, Ohio, a junior civilian analyst named Leonard Fisk studies photographs of damaged aircraft shipped back from England. He lays them out on a table. Nose section shredded. Instrument panels peppered. Control columns bent. He notices something that feels obvious once seen. The fragments come from below and forward. The armor does not. Fisk sketches a rectangle on a notepad. He draws it under the instrument panel, just ahead of the pilot's knees. The wrong place, according to everything he was taught. He knows the arguments before he hears them. Weight forward is dangerous. Space is limited. Maintenance becomes harder. The manuals say no. But the chalkboard in England does not care what the manuals say. And somewhere over the Ruhr, flak is already climbing toward the next formation. The plate that should not exist. March 27, 1943. Wright Field, Ohio. Leonard Fisk does not sleep much that week. His office smells of stale cigarettes and blueprint ink, the desk crowded with damage reports flown back from England in courier planes. Each photograph is stamped with a serial number and a date. Each one tells the same quiet story. Jagged holes below the windshield. Shrapnel scars climbing upward like fingers. Fisk pins the photographs to a corkboard. He draws chalk lines between them. Angles. Entry points. Probable burst heights. The pattern is undeniable once mapped. Flak fragments are entering low, rising through the nose, and killing the men who fly the airplane before it even knows it is dying. He brings the sketches to his supervisor, Major Robert Ellison, a man with a pilot's posture and an engineer's skepticism. Ellison listens, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're suggesting armor under the instrument panel," Ellison says. "Yes, sir." Ellison exhales slowly. "That's forward of the center of gravity. You put steel there, you change everything." "I know. You slow the climb. You change trim. You stress the nose gear. You make maintenance hell." "I know." Ellison taps the photograph of a destroyed cockpit. A red circle marks where a co-pilot should have been sitting. "You're asking me to violate approved specifications." Fisk nods. "I'm asking you to stop pilots from being killed by fragments coming from a direction we ignored." Ellison does not answer right away. He has flown bombers. He knows what flak sounds like when it walks toward you. He also knows what the procurement boards will say. Weight is sacred. Balance is survival. 2 days later, Ellison sends Fisk's proposal forward anyway, stamped experimental. No press release. No announcement. Just a quiet request to fabricate a test plate. The plate is small. Smaller than anyone expects. 12 by 18 inches. Quarter-inch hardened steel. It weighs less than 30 pounds. It mounts below the instrument panel, angled slightly to deflect upward traveling fragments. The first mechanics who see it shake their heads. "That's not where armor goes," one says. The engineers say the same thing. So do the test pilots. So does the manual. But no one can point to a regulation that explicitly forbids it. It is simply not done. By April 4th, the modified B-17 is ready for flight testing. It takes off normally, climbs a little slower, not enough to ground it. The pilots report no handling surprises, no nose heaviness worth mentioning. On April 12th, the aircraft is disassembled again. The plate is removed. Its backside is inspected. It is pitted, scarred. One fragment embedded deep enough to have killed anyone sitting behind it. No one speaks for a moment. Ellison signs off on a limited field trial. No mass order. No official doctrine change. Just a small batch shipped to England with instructions that read like a suggestion rather than a command. Install where feasible. Monitor results. At RAF Bassingbourn, the crates arrive unceremoniously. No speeches. No flags. Just steel wrapped in grease paper. Ground crews open them and frown. "What's this supposed to do?" a crew chief asks. "Stop flak," the paperwork says. "From where?" "From below." The chief snorts. "About time." The first aircraft to receive the plate belongs to the 91st Bomb Group. Its pilot is Captain Thomas Keane, 31, already on his 18th mission. He watches the mechanics bolt the steel under his instrument panel. "That's not standard," he says. "No, sir," the mechanic replies. "Neither is getting shot in the chest." Keane runs his hand along the edge of the plate. It does not look like much. It does not feel like salvation. Just a piece of metal in a place no one ever thought mattered. 3 days later, Keane's crew is scheduled to fly again. Target Schweinfurt. Heavy flak expected. At the briefing, intelligence officers talk about gun concentrations and burst altitudes. No one mentions the new armor. It is not official enough to be worth words. As the bombers climb into formation, flak begins earlier than expected. Black bursts blossom below them, perfectly spaced. Keane hears the familiar hammering impacts against the nose, feels the vibration through the yoke. He braces without thinking. A burst detonates directly beneath the cockpit. Something slams into the front of the aircraft with a violent clang. The sound echoes like a struck anvil. The nose shudders. Instruments flicker. Keane is still breathing. So is his co-pilot. When they land hours later, maintenance crews crawl into the nose with flashlights. They find the plate dented inward, a shard of steel lodged halfway through. Behind it, the cockpit is untouched. Word spreads fast, faster than orders ever do. Another crew asks for the plate. Then another. Engineers back home still argue. Weight charts are updated. Memos circulate warning about forward loading. No one formally approves anything yet. But the chalkboard in England begins to change. Casualties among pilots and co-pilots drop. Not gradually, not statistically over months. They drop immediately, and no one can pretend they do not see it. When the crews started asking for it. April 18, 1943. RAF Bassingbourn, England. The rain turns the hard stand into a slick of oil and mud, boots sucking at the ground as crews move between aircraft. The modified B-17 sits among the others, indistinguishable except for what no one can see from the outside. Inside its nose, a small steel plate waits. Captain Thomas Keane finishes his post-flight report with a blunt pencil. He circles one line twice. Flak damage to nose. Crew uninjured. He does not dress it up. He does not use technical language. He simply writes what happened. By midday, his report has been read by 3 other pilots. By evening, 5 crew chiefs know exactly where that plate is mounted. By the next morning, ground crews are arguing over which airplane should get the next one. It does not take official confirmation. It takes survival. On April 20th, a bomber from the same group comes back missing half its nose plexiglass. The cockpit looks like it has been sandblasted. The pilots climb out shaking, alive. The armor plate is bent nearly flat against the mounting bolts, its surface cratered like the moon. The men gather around it silently. Someone taps the steel with a knuckle. That did it, he says. Word spreads across the airfield. Not through memos. Through cigarette smoke and mess hall conversations. Through quiet gestures toward the nose of an aircraft and a nod that means everything. Soon, crews are asking for the plate before they ask about fuel loads. Pilots start refusing aircraft that do not have it installed. They phrase it politely. Regulations still matter. But so does coming home. At group headquarters, Colonel James Whittaker listens to the reports with his jaw set. He knows what this means. He also knows what Washington will say if he pushes too hard. Are you telling me this thing works? He asks Keane directly. Yes, sir. Are you telling me you want it on every aircraft? Yes, sir. Whittaker exhales. You understand it isn't approved. Keane nods. I understand my co-pilot is alive. Whittaker sends a message up the chain that afternoon. It is carefully worded. Observed reduction in cockpit casualties. Possible correlation with experimental armor installation. Request guidance. The reply takes days. In the meantime, flak does not wait. April 23rd. Mission over Bremen. Heavy concentrations. Bombers rocked violently on the bomb run. 2 aircraft lost. Several damaged. Every crew that returns with the new plate has the same story. Loud impacts. Violent jolts. No dead pilots. Every crew without it loses at least 1 man up front. By the end of the week, the difference is impossible to ignore. Medical officers compile casualty lists and frown. The numbers do not follow expected curves. They do not taper or fluctuate. They split cleanly down the middle. Aircraft with the plate. Aircraft without it. One surgeon writes in the margin of his report, "Why are we not doing this everywhere?" Back in Ohio, Leonard Fisk receives a cable with the casualty figures attached. He spreads them across his desk, hands trembling slightly as he runs the numbers again. Pilot and co-pilot casualties reduced by nearly 50%. Not over months. Over days. He brings the data to Major Ellison. Ellison reads it twice, then a third time more slowly. They're going to hate this, Ellison says. They can't argue with it. They will try. The pushback comes fast. Engineers warn of long-term stress, of cumulative weight increases, of what happens when every crew asks for something extra. Slippery slopes and cracked bulkheads. One memo states plainly that the plate is installed in the wrong place. Ellison writes his response with care. He does not argue philosophy. He attaches the casualty numbers. Meanwhile, the field units stop waiting. Ground crews begin fabricating their own versions from scrap armor. Some are rough. Some are crude. All are placed in the same spot, under the instrument panel, angled upward. They are not identical, but they work. A navigator named Frank Doyle scribbles in his diary after a mission to Kiel. Flak came up like stairs. Plate rang like a bell. Still here. By early May, more than half the bombers in the group carry some form of the unauthorized plate. Official inspections look the other way. Everyone knows why. Colonel Whitaker receives another cable. This one is shorter. Authorized full installation. There is a pause at higher headquarters. Weeks of silence. Committees debate. Engineers adjust spreadsheets. Lawyers worry about liability. Then the next casualty report arrives, and the argument ends. On May 14, 1943, a directive is issued quietly. No fanfare. No announcement to the press. A simple instruction to incorporate additional forward cockpit armor into all B-17s as materials allow. The manuals are updated later. The crews do not wait for them. The plate that should not exist becomes standard, and flak, for the first time in months, stops winning quite so easily. The engineers admit the battlefield was right. May 22, 1943. Wright Field, Ohio. The conference room is full in a way it has not been before. Not with excitement, but with unease. Slide rules lie untouched beside coffee cups. Charts are pinned to boards showing climb rates, fuel burn, and center of gravity shifts measured down to tenths of an inch. At the front of the room, Major Robert Ellison clears his throat. "We were wrong about the direction of the threat," he says. No one interrupts him. That alone is unusual. Ellison gestures to a projected diagram of a B-17 cockpit. Red arrows rise from below, converging under the instrument panel. "We designed for pursuit fire. The Germans used gravity and timing." An older engineer shifts in his chair. "The manuals were based on fighter engagement doctrine." "Yes," Ellison replies. And Flak ignored it. The data is laid out piece by piece. Not anecdotes. Not stories. Hard numbers from England. Casualty curves before and after installation. Photographs of dented plates. Medical reports showing the absence of fragment injuries that once defined bomber cockpits. Someone asks about weight. Ellison answers, 30 pounds. Less than a full ammunition box. Negligible impact on mission success compared to losing a pilot. Someone asks about precedent. Ellison answers that too. Precedent is men dying while we debated. By the end of the meeting, no one is arguing against the plate itself. They are arguing about how they missed it. The answer is uncomfortable. They designed the aircraft from a desk. The battlefield redesigned it in the air. By June, production lines are modified. New B-17s roll out with the plate already installed, neatly fitted, painted to match the cockpit. No longer experimental. No longer ugly. In England, crews notice immediately. New aircraft feel the same, fly the same, but the fear changes. Not gone, just dulled slightly. A sense that the airplane is finally watching the same direction the enemy is coming from. On June 11, 1943, Captain Thomas Keane completes his 25th mission. He stands beside his aircraft afterward, helmet under his arm, eyes on the nose section. "That piece of steel," he tells a reporter quietly, "did more than any gun on this ship." The reporter does not print it. Security regulations. But the sentiment spreads anyway. Other bomber groups report similar results as the modification propagates. Loss rates do not vanish. Flak is still lethal. Fighters still tear formations apart. But the sudden deaths in the cockpit become rarer. Pilots start living long enough to learn. Long enough to adapt tactics. Long enough to train replacements. Long enough to finish tours. Leonard Fisk receives a commendation in the mail. It is brief. No ceremony. Just a line noting his contribution to aircraft survivability. He pins it to the corkboard where the original photographs once hung. The board is empty now. In the field, maintenance crews stop improvising. They bolt in standardized plates, torque them to spec, move on to the next aircraft. The unauthorized fix becomes invisible, which is the point. On July 4, 1943, a formation crosses the French coast under heavy fire. Flak bursts perfectly spaced. Several aircraft are hit. One limps home with its nose shredded. The pilots step out alive. The medics shake their heads, then write fewer names. Back in Washington, a procurement officer reviews casualty trends and circles one line. He writes in the margin, "Unexpected improvement." No one corrects him, because the improvement was never unexpected to the men who heard that first ringing clang and realized the airplane had taken the hit instead of them. The engineers adjust their models. Threat vectors are redrawn. New doctrines include lessons that once seemed too obvious to matter. Small changes can be decisive, especially when they are placed exactly where theory says they should not be. The lesson that spread beyond one airplane. August 2, 1943. Over Regensburg, Germany. The bombers fly into a wall of black bursts so dense it looks solid. Flak does not rise in scattered puffs anymore. It climbs in ladders, carefully measured, bursting at the exact altitude where aluminum and flesh share the sky. Inside another B-17 cockpit, the plate takes hit after hit. Each impact is a violent jolt, a metallic scream that echoes through the nose. The pilots flinch instinctively, then keep flying. They have learned to trust that sound. By now, the modification is no longer a curiosity. It is assumed. New crews are surprised to learn there was ever a time without it, and the idea behind it begins to travel. At a briefing in England, an armor officer sketches on a chalkboard, pointing to the underside of the cockpit. Threat came from below. We put steel where the threat was. Someone in the back mutters, "Seems simple." It is not simple. It is a mindset. Tank units in Italy are watching their own casualty reports. Crews are being hit through unexpected angles. Mines and shaped charges punch upward. Fragments enter through floor plates designed for something else entirely. Someone remembers the bomber fix. A thin steel reinforcement is added under the driver's seat of a Sherman. Not thick, not heavy, just enough to catch fragments before they reach legs and torsos. Casualties drop, not officially at first, quietly, crew to crew, the same way it started in England. On destroyers in the Pacific, engineers look at where kamikaze fragments travel after impact. On transports, medics notice patterns of wounds and begin asking why certain bulkheads are bare. The lesson repeats itself everywhere the war allows time to observe. Doctrine predicts one threat. Reality delivers another. By late 1943, engineering offices are changing how they read battlefield data. Instead of asking whether an aircraft meets specifications, they ask where the men are actually dying. The answer is often uncomfortable. Leonard Fisk is invited to speak at a small conference. He does not give a speech. He shows photographs. He shows casualty curves. He points to a rectangle drawn in pencil. "That's it," he says. "That's the difference." No one argues. The war grinds on. Losses continue. But fewer pilots die without ever knowing what hit them. Captain Thomas Keane finishes his tour in September. He hands over his aircraft to a replacement crew and runs his hand along the edge of the cockpit as he climbs down. "Take care of her," he says. The new pilot nods. He does not know why Keane pauses there. He does not need to. Back in England, the chalkboards change again. Not dramatic, just quieter. Fewer erasures. Fewer sudden additions. The fix does not make headlines. There is no headline for a plate of steel, but it changes how people think. About armor. About engineering. About the distance between a desk and a battlefield. And about how sometimes the smallest change, made in exactly the wrong place, can decide who walks away and who does not. The change no one celebrated. December 24, 1943. RAF Bassingbourn, England. Snow crusts the edges of the airfield, crunching under boots as ground crews move with stiff fingers and quiet efficiency. The bombers sit in their revetments, dark against the pale morning, engines ticking as they warm. Another mission is being prepared. Another day that may or may not end with empty bunks. Inside one of the aircraft, a young pilot settles into the left seat. He has flown only 3 combat missions. He checks his instruments, adjusts his harness, and rests his boots against the rudder pedals. Below the instrument panel, the armor plate is already there. He does not think about it. No one mentions it. It is part of the airplane now, like the throttle quadrant or the yoke. He has no memory of a time when it was not. Flak greets them over the continent, precise and merciless. The bursts rock the bomber, filling the cockpit with noise and vibration. Something strikes the nose hard enough to make the pilot gasp. The plate rings. The aircraft keeps flying. When they land, the pilot laughs shakily, the sound too loud in the cold air. The crew walks away, shoulders hunched, alive. In an office thousands of miles away, a clerk updates casualty statistics for the year. The numbers are still grim. War does not become gentle because of one fix. But a line that once climbed steeply now rises more slowly. There is no ceremony, no ribbon, no speech about innovation. The plate is not named after anyone. Leonard Fisk's contribution appears in no history book. Captain Keene's report gathers dust in a file. The war moves on to new problems. Pressurized cabins, longer ranges, different enemies. Yet the lesson remains, buried inside aluminum noses and steel hulls. Protection must follow the threat, not the theory. The battlefield is the final engineer. Years later, veterans sit in quiet rooms and talk about missions that should have killed them. They mention flak. They mention noise. They mention luck. Sometimes, one of them taps a finger against a table, remembering the sound of steel taking a hit meant for flesh. They never knew who decided to put that plate there. They only knew it worked.